Welcome back, everyone. Today's video is going to be titled Blind Dogmen. And it's not meant to be disrespectful, but it's not really a warning. It's more educational, more towards the advice side of things. And again, nothing meant for legal purposes. Everything that I talk about is historical, educational experience. And we all fall into ruts sometimes. If we don't recognize them, we're going to get stuck. Most people have heard the term, and a lot of people understand the term kennel blindness, which basically means you put yourself in a spot where you're not being true to yourself, you're not being true to your dogs. It could be health, maintenance. You get too concerned with the pedigrees, not that concerned with the individuals. Could be too much inbreeding, too much outcrossing, not keen on bloodlines or individuals in your line breedings. You just kind of get in a rut where you start making excuses for your dogs. Meaning, I'm going to breed this dog because of the way it's bred. I'm going to breed this dog because he's the only one in the litter. I'm going to breed this dog because although he may be a great performer, his litter mates and ancestry doesn't show that. When you're talking about blind dogmen, it encompasses that too, but there's different aspects to that as well. One question would be, well, how do you get blind? How does a dogman become blind? And some of the, I'll go over some of the aspects of it. A lot of times, and for the most part, and I've talked to a lot of old timers, and myself included, and even dogmen that I knew during my time competed against. You compete in a certain area, and you do good in that area. Now, depending on where you're at, because even if in the people in your area are top dogmen, you may not be the one that's going into it. If you are, that's good. You hear stuff about, neighborhood matches and backyard stuff and all that. That's on a very low level. And even if that's how you start, you can always rise up. Some people don't really rise up. So for example, if you lived in Chicago area back in the day, if you had people like to compete against Joe Corvino, whoever handled his dog, Sonny Sykes, Buffalo Soldier, Nate, Aaron, a lot of these old dogmen that were considered top dog guys, that's one thing. Or if you're in Louisiana area and you compete against the Daigles and Trahan and Fontenot and Jimmy Wimberly, even though he was right on the border of Louisiana and Texas, we know that he handled and conditioned a lot of Tudor's dogs: Spike, Jeff, Buck, White Rock, Adolf. That's a lot different than just neighborhood stuff. And even in my area in California, during my time, people like Tito and the Local Boys, Pineapple Kid, OTK, LA Dream Team, CMB, Vinny, a lot of different guys that were considered top dogmen. That's a lot different than just, like I said, the kind of backyard stuff, not really going outside of your area. And some of these guys back in the day, and they'll admit, they just stayed in their area. And a lot of people would come outside of the area to them. They would travel some, but the bulk of their uh, career was in their area. Doesn't mean they didn't go outside of the area, just like me. I basically stayed in my area, California, which is a big state, covers a large area. And I ventured out to Arizona and Vegas and Nevada. But it was always what I considered, after some point, because I started that way too. Just local guys here and there, off the chain stuff, 2-week keeps and 10-day keeps, stuff like that. Small money. And the money is not a factor, but I'm just saying I didn't start out betting $1,000. And at some point you got to advance, because if you want to be considered among the best, that's who you have to compete against. And some of the guys traveled long distances. Some of the people I just mentioned, including Steve Hendricks, Tito and the Local Boys, OTK, and Pineapple Kid, Vinny. Either go down south into Mexico or back east all the way to the Carolinas, Kentucky, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, right? And a lot of people going back in the day, like Carver and Bobby Hall and different people, Mr. Gray, and several people would actually compete in Mexico. Sometimes it's a short trip across the border, sometimes it's 1,500 or 2,000 miles down into Mexico. So unless you do things like that, or at least are a part of it and get to see a lot of it, you really don't know the difference. And that's part of the point of this video. You have to see different competitors, different competition, different keeps, different dogs, different bloodlines, different weights to be able to judge. And you have to see them on a lower scale, and you have to see them on a higher scale. And that doesn't mean the lower dogs aren't any good. They could be. It would be similar to Mickey Ward and what's that? They had that trilogy, Ward and Gotti, right? Top 10 fighters. I think one of them won a title. I think Gotti did at some point. Not the elite fighters, but definitely top fighters. And amongst each other, they put on displays that covered the whole gamut of what we consider as gameness and power. And what makes people like them stand out, for me anyways, is the ability to take punishment. Now that's not the idea in boxing. It shouldn't be the idea in anything, but you get into those wars, and that's where you find out what kind of fortitude you have. I'll say this too, because I've seen it happen with dogs. At some point, it seems like they're going to quit. It seems like they want to quit, but they don't. They push through it. And that's the mark of a game individual. So you have two fighters almost evenly matched, putting on a great display of courage and good ability, but not at the top, not like a elite fighter. That takes nothing away from him. I got a lot of respect for him. But it's just an example of where you have two fighters on the same level going at it and displaying everything you want to see in open competition. I've had that happen in dogs. I've seen others have it in dogs on different levels. On a lower level, that's why I don't take nothing away from the dogs and the people that were involved in it, especially in my day. I give them a lot of respect. So you can see that, all that display on a lower level, on a higher level, and at an elite level. But like I mentioned, if you don't see the difference, then you don't know what to compare it to. You have to see the difference. So dogs and dogs, it can be good in one area and not so good in another area. Or they could be good in one area and better in another area, and there's a lot of factors. Depends on who's conditioning them, who's handling them. Depends on the weather. If they're coming from the cold and going to the heat and they're not used to it, it could affect them. Going from the heat to the cold, it could affect them. They're not used to it. Higher and lower elevation. They haven't been there long enough to adapt to the higher elevation, could affect them, the thinner air. So you have to experience all these things, either personally or, like I said, be a part of it in some form and fashion to know the difference. And sometimes dogmen make statements or make observations without that experience. And if you don't have the experience and you apply that to your own dogs, you're kind of falling short, or you're cutting them short, and you're cutting yourself short because you're limited in what you've done and what you've seen and where you've been and who you competed against. And again, all this stuff I talk about could be applied to today's time with legal sports and hunting, a lot of different things. It would be the same thing, it's just you're not doing what we used to do with them back in the day. Nothing wrong with that, but the concepts, the expectations, the knowledge, the experience, the quality, the class, it's the same. It's either down here or up here. And what you want to do is bring your dogs up to this level. A lot of it has to do with things I've talked about in the past, meaning health and immune system, durability, intelligence, being able to travel, being able to be handled by different people, being familiar with different atmospheres and different areas, things that they have never seen before, but because of how you raise them, getting them used to loud noise and all this stuff that I've talked about in the past, and riding around in vehicles and being handled by different people, that helps elevate the quality of the individual, along with good food, good housing, upkeep, and regular exercise. Believe it or not, you put all that stuff together, and that will raise the quality of your animal. If you don't, you may not see the full potential of your animal, and you won't know his full potential because you never put him through the stress and the trials and tribulations and awkward situations like that to know what your dog is about. You just assume, and I see that a lot, kind of in a roundabout way, or on different chats, different comments. You know, the Google and YouTube and Instagram is full of thousands and thousands of people and millions of comments. So when somebody's talking about their dogs or litters they have coming up, you know, they use keywords like, you know, I have great expectations, and this litter is fire, and these should be some good ones, and, you know, this is going to change the game. This type of breeding never been done before, and all that. It just makes me pause, because after hearing those statements and watching people talk, nobody asks them, why did you say that? Why do you expect that? And you can give answers without what's the word? Incriminating yourself. You know, especially when it comes to the feed and the health side. And, you know, I've mentioned this before. People will always say, this is the best thing, and this is the best this and the best that. And my answer, or my thought, not answer, but my thought always was, well, how come the stuff you were using before, that was the best? Now, it could be that those things change. There's advancement, there's better quality, whatever. But they don't tell you that. So I'm kind of, that's kind of my way of thinking. And a lot of times, when I do get into those conversations, they're able to tell me exactly what they mean. Now, I have a lot of respect for those guys. If it's someone they don't want to talk about or don't want to mention it, they want to keep it to themselves, that's fine. And they'll tell me that too. I don't have a problem with that. But it's either one or the other. Either say you don't want to say it or give your reasons why. If you don't want to help somebody, that's fine. Nothing ever forces you, and I don't expect anybody to help anybody if they don't want to. But if they do, you have to give proper information. You have to give stats and reasons why, and give examples of why you consider this better than what you used to use before. And if all what you're doing helps you develop better dogs and help you breed better dogs and helps you improve on your family of dogs, then you're doing something good. You're going to reach that top elite level. You will. There's nothing stopping you. It doesn't take a certain type of person except, and I mean, status-wise or background-wise or education-wise. All walks of life have been involved in that elite, upper echelon part of the breed. What I mean is that anybody can do it if you have determination, if you put in the hard work, if you accept trial and error, keep true to yourself, don't be dogman blind, where you're making excuses for your dogs or for your family. If something doesn't work, discard it out of your breeding program. If it does, advance with it wholeheartedly. Go 100 miles an hour, go full force, and put everything you can into it. It's important, dedication is an important thing. And there's very few people that start out knowing how to get to the results that they want. So that's why we say a lot of times it takes years to learn this stuff. And it takes years to develop a family of dog in several generations. And I've mentioned that you can have your own family of dogs in 3 or 4 generations. That's standard. But that doesn't mean that those, after 3 or 4 generations, your goals are finished or your goals have ended. That just means that you've established a foundation and you've established a family of dogs. And it could come from pre-existing outcrossed, line-bred, or inbred dogs, or putting all 3 of those together, or sticking to one or the other to a certain extent. Some people like a lot of crossing. There's nothing wrong with that as long as you add some line breeding and inbreeding to it. Just like people prefer inbreeding. Nothing wrong with that as long as you add some line breeding and outcrossing to it. And the same with line breeding. That's why we talk about all 3 methods of breeding, because they're all intermingled, they all have their place. If you go too far one way or the other on any one of them, not enough or too much, it could cause mishaps in your breeding program, in your family of dogs. That takes time to learn. But if you don't recognize the mishaps, if you don't recognize that something didn't work, and let's say you made inbreeding, and it didn't work, well, where do you go from there? Go back 1 generation and go in a different direction, or use different individuals. The method itself, the breeding technique itself, is not wrong. It's generally the individuals you used are wrong. And it's a lot harder to correct mistakes than by continuing in that direction than it is to not make the mistake in the first place, or stopping the mistake right there and trying something different. So all that in developing a family of dogs takes time. There's no quick trip, even though you're successful with 1 litter, let's say. It doesn't mean that the dogs from that litter are going to be able to continue to produce good dogs. If they do, then you're headed in the right direction. So by my way of thinking, unless it does work, it does hit most of the boxes in your standard, it's not a successful breeding. If it does, then that allows you to continue forward and not get into that blind dogman rut where, I'm going to fix it, I'm going to make it work, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that. That doesn't mean you don't try this and try that, but you have to have a reason for doing it. You have to have some kind of rules for yourself that tells you, I'm going to try this and I'm going to try that. If it's something different, even more so. That's kind of the unknown. If it's something that has previously worked, then you have more success of it working again. And the way you get around that, inbreeding depression or getting in a rut or anything like that is use the same techniques with different individuals. Or you include relatives to the dogs that you based your foundation on or your family on. Or you use the same bloodline, could even be similar dogs, but different from the ones you have. Meaning you could put several different lines of Eli blood together, or Eli crosses. You could be using Midnight Cowboy dogs and Stomper dogs and Niggerino dogs and Stompanato dogs and T-Bud dogs and Skull Blood and all this and that. They all have the commonality of Eli, but you're not getting in that rut where they're so heavily related that they lose performance and health and durability. That's what helps you continue forward. So you may use a couple of different types of Jeep dogs, type bred Jeep dogs. You may use, inbred Jeep to sister Kate, or you may use father-daughter Jeep. And with that, you can do your Jeep Red Boy crosses, you can do your Jeep Rascal crosses, Jeep Bully Son crosses, Jeep Skull crosses, Jeep Lapase crosses, whatever it is. And as you go along, you're breeding the offspring and progeny of all those breedings where the common denominator is Jeep, even Rascal Jr. stuff. So that would increase, and Otis Honey Bunch stuff, that would increase your commonality of Honey Bunch, but the dog aren't too tight. And you can continue that way for a long time rather than getting stuck in that rut of the dogs being too tight and now you're losing stuff. That's the blindness, dogman blindness that I'm speaking of. And that's why we've talked over and over, which we didn't used to in the past, about breeding solely on pedigree or mainly on pedigrees. That pedigree is important, but it has to have the performance to back it up. It's a map. It helps you at the time you're making your breedings, and it helps you as you move forward, and you can refer back to it and see how things were done by others, other dogmen or the breed you got it from, or even past generations. It's a model to tell you how it was done. But if your dogs don't meet the criteria, it doesn't help that much. If they do, then at some point you're going to look back and see how you did it. Or you're going to look at it and say, I want to repeat this particular breeding because it worked. It may be different individuals, but the method, the technique is the same. Could be like one particular bloodline on the top and the other particular bloodline on the bottom if you're making an outcross. You have to have tried it two different ways. That way you know which one seemed to work better for you, depending on how many breedings you make, and which one didn't, or just which one you prefer. So it could be, let's say Jeep Red Boy. You like daughters of Red Boy bred to Jeep himself, like Tabby Girl, like Fanny, right? And you're doing that because you want daughters of Jeep from that breeding, and you want sons of Tabby Girl and Fanny from that breeding to help you continue forward. If you reverse it and it's daughters of Jeep bred to Red Boy himself, I don't even know if that, I'm just using an example, I don't recall that type of breeding being made. But for example, Hunter Red was bred to Jeep and Rascal females. So if you like daughters of Hunter Red and want him as the sire, and you want sons of the females Hunter Red was bred to, you go that direction, which puts the Red Boy at the top and the Jeep stuff on the bottom. It depends what you like and what the results have proven to you to work best. So if you don't go through that process, you're going to be a blind dog man. And you have to accept failures, and you have to know how to improve your dogs, and you have to go through the whole process of finding out what works and what don't for you. Because what works for you may not work for someone else simply by the fact that another person don't have the same dogs you do. Or he may have litter mates to what you have, but they may be throwing different stuff than the litter mates that you have. So the main thing when you're developing a family of dogs, and you have your own family of dogs, is to concentrate on your own dogs. And what has happened in the past with several bloodlines, a lot of them, which is why you don't really hear about them no more, is the deterioration of certain lines. And that's because of just about everything I just said. They're lost because they get stuck in that rut of too much inbreeding. Or they're lost because they're not based on performance anymore. Or they're lost because the person dies and the dogs die along with them. Nobody else carried it on. And sometimes they're lost because they change names. So the blood itself is not really lost, it's just the breeder or the names of the dogs that are being keyed on have changed. Which is why we say Boleo bred dogs or Carver bred dogs or Jeep bred dogs. They're too far away from those dogs and breeders to say these are Carver dogs. But if someone kept the traits of those dogs, good ones that they got from Carver, and kept breeding them and adding crosses and doing their line breedings and doing some inbreeding, and they all go back to Carver stuff, yes, it's a Carver bred dog. But like I said, the names of the dogs have changed. And you know, you've heard it and I've heard it where people will say, why do you call it a Carver dog? So that's why I prefer to say Carver bred dog. But let's just say, why do you call it a Carver dog if it's been so long? And sometimes people do it for clout, and sometimes people do it for money sales. But a lot of the times people do it because they don't know the dogs that you're talking about. They don't have any information on them. You can't give information from the last 2-3 generations before the dogs you got, meaning their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. There's very little information. So if somebody asks me, you know, they say, well, what's schoolboy blood? I hear schoolboy this and schoolboy that. What is it? I don't know you. I don't know what your stuff is. I have to tell them, based off of Honey Bunch, it's mainly Jeep stuff with Rascal Jr. stuff. Got some Bully Son in it. And they're familiar with those names. So, you know, and a certain amount of Red Boy in there. That Jeep Red Boy cross. So these are some of the reasons why a bloodline are lost. and why we call them by them old names, because that's what people recognize and understand. And also, a lot of the old names, breeders and dogs, their history has been written. You can find their matches in the old magazine. You can find their breedings that people made with them, advertisements, stories about them in real time during that time period. Where some of the current dogs, you can't. And people want accolades. They want to know certain things, and that has to be provided. And now, today's time, they have to be provided without someone incriminating themselves. A lot of times it's hard to talk about it. And that's where, like I've said in the past, you can talk about health and structure, behavior and temperament, athleticism, those kind of accolades, whatever you're doing legally with them. But even taking all that history in the past, a lot of that can be seen in present day dogs because that's where they came from. And one of the reasons people steer away from those old bloodlines is just that. They've lost the traits. They may physically appear to look like those dogs of the past, but they don't retain a lot of the good traits that those dogs of the past had, or those bloodlines of the past had. And I'm not going to give any names, but that can happen with almost any bloodline, any breeder's dogs, any particular dog, which is why even in real time in the past, some dogs didn't produce that well. Some dogs were great producers and still threw culls. So you got to kind of weed through. And again, that's that dog-man blindness that this topic is about. Just because a dog is off a certain dog or from a previously successful bloodline or family of dogs doesn't mean the individuals that you have in front of you are that caliber of dog. And again, you got to know the difference and see the difference to make an honest evaluation. Which leads me to the last part, which is, I've said it before, I'll repeat it over and over again. It's always best to breed your own dogs. You know what you got, you know where they came from. A lot of times you can't trust other people to tell you the truth. A lot of times you can't trust other people to deal you the right way, as Mayfield would say, the way they deal you or how they dealt you or whatever, because he's right. Not everybody is honest, but you can find those honest people, and that would be the people you would deal with. And everybody, I don't know anybody who hasn't gone through those mishaps, being cheated, lied to, stolen from. There's always negatives involved in anything you do, not just in dogs, but in life. So if you're willing to accept that that could happen and that it has happened, and you learn how to avoid it, and you steer away from those people and concentrate on your own dogs, you'll get to the point where you don't have to deal with those dishonest people. And they usually get outed, and they usually don't last too long, or they have a reputation. Now they got to hide. Somebody's going to talk about them online now. It's instant and it's worldwide. So they may not have realized the repercussions of their actions until it comes around and bites them in the ass. And it usually does. You can't escape it. There's too many people involved. And like I said, now the information is almost instantaneous. So if you live that way in the dog world, you live that way in your real life, and at some point it's going to come back on you. So if you are willing to put in that time and work and understand that there's different levels to quality, and you want to have the best that you can possibly develop, you have to do it. Breeding, maintaining, raising your own family of dogs. That's the best way to do it. Boyles told me that a long time ago. I took it to heart. He was right. I proved my dogs to be pretty damn successful. And others used dogs from me or bred off of my dog or down from my stuff. And that's a great compliment when someone else can take your stuff and do good with it. If you keep it in-house and it don't go nowhere, nothing wrong with that either. But you have to have some kind of stats to back up what you're saying. And if you do, others recognize it and they'll give you credit. And even if it's a hater, he may be a hater, he may criticize you, but he can't deny the facts of your success. So people like that are insignificant anyways. So developing your own family of dogs, laying a foundation, and then moving forward generation after generation, where you see some incremental improvement, that's success. And if you have dogs at that high level, you're on the same plane as others that were at that level too. And maybe if you're a mentor to someone younger, and that younger person improves on what you taught them and showed them and gave them or sold them or whatever, that's the biggest compliment, that they did better than you did. That's advancement, that's improvement, that's preservation of the breed that we talk about. So this, like I said, it's not a criticism, but it's advice not to become a blind dogman. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for your support.